Hey everyone, it's great to see you all again. If you recall in last week's video, I went over just a couple of the ways that I really like to use masks when editing my photos. And one of those techniques I really felt like needed this entire video because of how simple the concept is. The execution can really vary depending on how you approach it or depending on how you want the results to come out. And in today's video, we are going to go over 3 different ways you can use the dodge and burn technique. 2 of them we're going to stay in Lightroom, and then the last one we're going to jump over to Photoshop. So I hope you all enjoy. Before we start, I like to mention that I kind of formatted this video in a way where it starts off with the simplest and easiest technique, and it kind of goes through the most advanced and most customizable technique in Photoshop. Just keep that in mind. So what is dodging and burning? Dodging and burning at the most basic level is brightening up the highlights and darkening down the shadows of your image to create more contrast and depth. So if we jump into Lightroom here, this is the image that I actually used in last week's video as an example of the dodging and burning technique. And so I figured I may as well use the same image to kind of show you the results, how it varies between the different techniques. So I'll just quickly go through. I did do some basic editing on this with the exposure and all the global sliders. So I'll just go through with the tone curve, just a simple S curve, and mess with the color mixer. And then I have not applied any masks. So the first technique is just to use the brush tool in Lightroom. So we'll go over to the masking section and grab the brush. And then the first thing we're gonna do is that we're gonna want to dodge. So paint over all of the highlights in your photo. And a good rule of thumb is to just follow the light. If you have sunlight in your photo, just brighten up the parts or dodge the parts that are already lit up by the sun. It's the easiest way to start. So let's go around here and just dodge all these. We'll just highlight them for now. As you can see, the sun was coming over on the left side of the screen, the left side of this image. So we'll just brighten all of these parts up. I'm just going to quickly go over this because I did cover it in last week's, but so we'll just do a quick dodge burn. All right, so we got the highlights selected here. And what we're going to do to create the effect, we're just going to up the exposure just a tad bit, and then also increase the temperature a little bit if the sun is shining. You don't want to necessarily increase the temperature if it's like a cold photo or the sun wasn't really shining, it's just natural light. But in this instance, the sun was shining, and so it creates a little bit more of that warmth effect. So warm that up just a little bit, and then, oh, that's definitely too much. We'll go to about maybe 5 or 8. And then also just add a bit of contrast to those areas as well. Maybe bring those down a little bit. So as you can see, this is the dodging effect. And it's really simple. All we really did was brighten up the parts of the image that were already bright. And then actually, I don't know if we need much temperature on these. Just brighten up the image that were already brightened up by the sun. And it doesn't look like we did much, but as soon as we apply the burn effect, it's really gonna take shape. So if we just add another brush tool here, a good starting point for the burn effect is to just burn the areas right next to where you dodged. Usually when there's harsh sunlight or just sunlight in general, there's gonna be an area that you're gonna want to brighten up, and then right next to it, an area that's in shadow. So let's go over here and just burn or darken down these shadowy areas just with the brush tool here. And you can already see that I'm literally just painting over the parts of my image that are just the darkest. This should be fairly simple. I'm just gonna do a quick, and you're gonna wanna be very precise, but for everybody's, in respect to everybody's time, I'll just do a very, very quick edit on this one. So this, we're gonna darken down with the exposure. Oh, not that much. But if you could see what's happening here is that it's really just creating that extra bit of depth to the image and a bit of contrast as well. So if we take away the dodging and burning effect here, there is before, and everything just kind of looks flat. There are shadows, just because this image is a little bit dramatic in general, but there are shadows and the highlights do stand out. but we just exaggerate those a little bit more, and it just creates that extra depth. And then another thing I like to do is just create a custom vignette as well. So we can do this, and so it kind of takes away up here. I don't really want the viewer to see up on the top. I kind of want it to be focused down in this busier area here. So let's invert that and then just bring that down a little bit. And there you go. So that is the first technique. As you can see, it's very simple, kind of easy to go through, but it doesn't really give you much customization. And sometimes it can be hard, especially because I'm using a trackpad right now. It can be kind of hard to get pretty precise on the highlights, and you'll have to zoom in. It just might take a little bit more time. So this next technique is pretty similar to this first one, but it's just gonna kind of skip a step to just make it a little bit easier to get those highlights and those shadows right away. And we'll stick with the same image just so we can compare at the end how exactly these differ. And this one, we're gonna go over to the mask section, and we're gonna select the Luminance range mask. And what we're gonna wanna do is that we're gonna go drag this over to the highlights and then give it a little bit of feather here. What the Luminance mask is doing is that it's taking everything at that brightness value in this range, and it's going to select that. However, we don't want to use all of the highlights, so we'll just feather this here. And if we just brighten this up right how it is now, as you can see, it's going to brighten up. Oh, first of all, that's way too much, but it's going to brighten up more than what we want, and it's kind of bleeding into the shadows, and it just doesn't look all that great. So one thing that we can do is that we can go up to, we can right click on the mask, go to intersect mask with, and then brush. And then what that is going to do is that is going to basically only apply the mask, the Luminance mask, to the areas that we brush over. So you see that you can be a little bit less precise with your brush strokes, but it's still going to apply it just to those highlighted areas. We go kind of the same area, and this is just going to go by so much quicker. And then we can always go back and then add the brush later as well. So we're just painting over the highlighted parts, but only the selected highlighted parts that we wanted. So then we can go over and increase the exposure just a bit as well, and then increase the temperature if you like as well. And then you're just going to want to do the same for the shadows. So bring that exposure down just a little bit. I also would recommend, so you could click on the mask, and then if you see how it missed a couple spots in here, maybe it was too bright or too dark, you can always go to the mask, press this plus icon, and go down to brush. And then you can just fill in those kind of spotty areas that it may have missed. Now with adding this brush, it makes it so much smoother of a transition rather than just the highlighted pixels. So we could do the same for the shadows. So just go down to Luminance range, go up, and instead of going towards the highlights, go all the way towards the shadows. That is going to select the darkest parts of your image. So go down to the shadows, maybe a little bit more, feather it just a little bit, and then go up to the mask again, right click, intersect mask with brush, and then just brush over. And another way that this one kind of helps with the process is that it kind of gives you a starting point. If you're having a tough time kind of finding what the highlights are or what the shadows are, you can use the Luminance masks to kind of give you a range or a highlighted area where you can start and then kind of fill in what you'd like. So we'll just go over here, and it's just selecting the shadows. So it does make it just a little bit easier. And for this technique, it's basically doing the exact same thing as the last technique, although it just makes it a little bit easier and a little bit faster to get through the highlights and shadows. And especially if you're using a mouse or a trackpad like I am as of now, it can be just a little bit easier to be a little bit less precise. It can just be a little bit easier to be a tad bit less precise with your brush strokes, but still get the areas and still paint the areas you want. So I'm just going to take the exposure down just a little bit, and if we take these away, just the masks, that is before, and after, before and after. And again, it's basically doing the same exact thing as before, but just a little bit easier. So this last technique, we're going to delete these masks here, is going to be in Photoshop. And we're going to go right click the photo down in the bottom left, right click, go up to edit in, and Adobe Photoshop. So this next technique is really going to give you the most customization as far as colors and range. As you'll see, you'll be able to customize the overlay, the brush opacity, the brush strokes, and also the color of the brush you'd like. So first thing you're going to want to do is go down to the way bottom right of your screen, right next to the delete layer button, the trash can. You're going to add a layer, and we'll call this dodge. And to dodge, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set the blend mode to soft light or overlay, depending on the vividness of the dodging and burning you'd like, but I usually just do soft light. And we'll go up to here, adjust the brush size. You can adjust your hardness. I usually have it between 50 and 100, but you can always go lower and kind of experiment on your own. The opacity between 5 and 10, maybe sometimes less even. Flow 15% is fine, and then go down and make sure that you have a white brush. Or what you can do is you can click on the white icon, or you might have another color right there, and use the pen dropper and select the parts of your image that are in the sun or that you want to burn, that you want to dodge. And say you had a nice sunset going, you could select that color and then bring that sun color up. You don't want it down here because that'll just be too dark and too saturated. Bring it all the way up to the top and adjust it up here, and then you'll get that nice sun color with your brush instead of just a white. But for now, I'll just do white, and then I'll go back and do a little bit of color just to show you the effect. And so what we're going to just do is that we're just going to paint over the image and just paint over the highlights again to dodge the highlights. So as you can see, it's a very subtle effect, but you can always go back over and just keep dodging. You can also adjust the hardness. This technique is such more natural. It feels like more natural effect than the Lightroom dodging and burning techniques. As you can see, it's much more subtle and it feels more real. So here's before and here's after, and we'll just keep brushing on these highlights. You're going to want to zoom in with your photo and get exactly, but for everybody's sake of everybody's time, I'm just doing a very quick edit here, and there is the before and the after. And then as you can see, the overlay just adds a little bit more contrast and a little bit more oomph to that dodge effect, and I might use that for this photo. Maybe go back to soft light, but yeah. So that is basically the dodge effect. So now for the burn effect, we're gonna wanna add another layer. We can name it burn and keep everything the same. Change this to either overlay or soft light, and then make sure you have a black brush. And then just paint over the shadows there. Again, thinking about where you wanna burn. Is it right next to where you dodged? Most likely, but you might have other areas. Or you can also just burn areas that you don't want to be seen, even if it is in the light. If you don't want that area to be noticed as much, you can also burn those areas. It doesn't have to follow the light. It's really up to your personal preference. So go up here and just burn all these areas. Maybe make a bigger brush here. And this will just create a more natural effect. And you just keep brushing on. You can change the opacity if you don't think it's enough, or if it's too much. You can see that makes way bigger difference there. So if we take this is before and after. Again, just take it up here maybe a little bit more, and we're just brushing onto the shadowy parts. And this is definitely my favorite technique to use. This is the one that I like to use a lot. Maybe create more of a vignette. That might have been too much. There we go. And that is before and after. So going back to the what I talked about earlier with the customization of the colors. We're going to create a new dodge layer. So I deleted the old one, and then we're going to select soft light again. Then we're going to go over, select the white, and we're going to use this color dropper tool and select one of the colors that is, one of the areas that is in full sunlight. We'll drag that up all the way to the top so it's closest to white, and then use the brush of that color to brush on that basically that sunlight color to your image. And actually, I'm going to decrease the opacity, and as you can see now, you are painting on that sunlight color, so it's not just white. And this works very, very well if you have a sunset where you don't want to just brighten it up. You also want to bring that color out. So if we just do a quick little brush over, and I would normally go and zoom into areas and be really, really precise with what I want to be dodging and burning, but this was just a quick little edit. So if we do before, and then this is after the dodging and burning effect. So that last technique is definitely my favorite. It just gives you that extra layer of customization when it comes to your photo. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I upload every Sunday. I also have print sales on my website if you want to check that out, or subscribe to my weekly newsletter. That'll come out with updates on what is going on or different sales. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.